creation of Arda, the first will, before light was named, before darkness was feared. There was Kai, not a god bound by form, nor a ruler seated above creation, but the first will, the force from which intention, balance, and judgment emerged. Kai was not light. Light was balance. Kai was not darkness. Darkness was correction. Both were expressions of the same origin, shifting only when purpose demanded it. When Kai chose to bring existence into motion, it was not mercy that compelled him, but necessity. Stillness could not endure. The birth of the Nai. From his own essence, Kai shaped 7 entities. They were not children. They were not servants. They were conduits. Through them, Kai's will could flow without direct descent. Through them, creation could be guided, restrained, and corrected. They were called the Nai. They possessed no fixed form. Their nature shifted freely between clarity and shadow. Light when creation was required. Darkness when restraint became necessary. They required no worship, no sustenance, no devotion. They existed solely to translate intention into reality. The shaping of Arda. Together, Kai and the Nai shaped Arda, a realm where energy would no longer drift endlessly, but take weight, a world where action left memory, and consequence did not fade. Arda was not created to be peaceful. It was created to be stable, the authority of the seas. To shape life within this realm, Kai entrusted the seas with creation, not as subordinates, but because the seas alone could create endlessly, without attachment, without memory, without regret. They began simply. Algae, fish, predators, giants of the deep. Life fed upon life, and balance endured. For ages, Arda held. Sarima, the unreturning. But the seas, unburdened by restraint, created something that could not be returned. From depths untouched by the Nai, from power that bypassed intention, they shaped Sarima, a colossal serpent with 3 heads. She did not hunt to survive. She devoured to erase. Sarima mimicked the forms of other creatures, luring them into extinction. The oceans emptied. Balance collapsed, and the echo of annihilation reached even Kai. The descent and the wound. For the first time since existence began, Kai did not act through the Nai. He descended. From his own essence, he forged a weapon. A trident, 3-pronged and absolute. Each blade carried a law. Annihilation. Judgment. Balance. Kai struck Sarima. The seas convulsed. The serpent screamed as divine force tore through her scales. But the seas rose in fury. Waves became weapons. Currents became chains. They sought to crush Kai beneath infinite pressure. Bound and sinking, Kai did not strike Sarima again. Instead, he drove the trident downward. It pierced the ocean floor. The seabed fractured. Stone surged upward. Mountains erupted from the depths, lifting Kai toward the surface. Thus, land was born, not as a blessing, but as a division. Sarima was not slain. She was wounded and bound, entombed in the deep, sleeping, waiting. From that moment, existence carried a fault. The Zeta, keepers of balance. The land did not emerge empty. It breathed. Stone carried memory. Roots carried echoes of the depths. Kai knew the land could not be left without awareness. From the living energy of vegetation. Not flesh, not clay, not blood. He shaped the Zeta. They were small in stature, green of skin, hairless by design. Their bodies bore no organs for consumption. They did not eat. They did not hunt. They did not harvest. They lived by absorbing plant energy, not by draining it, but by harmonizing with it. Where the Zeta walked, Forests did not thin. Where they rested, soil did not weaken. They lived long lives, ended quietly, and reproduced without excess. They followed a single law. That which disrupts balance must not be allowed to persist. At the heart of Arda stood the ancient forest that would later be known as Gnarled. It was not governed, not worshipped, not claimed. It decided. The Zeta lived within it, not as masters, but as extensions of its will. The arrival of humanity. As centuries passed, the forest grew dense. Animal life multiplied. The land began to strain beneath abundance. Kai acted again. He created humans, not as rulers, not as servants, but as a corrective force. Humans consumed. They altered land to survive. They adapted by taking. They were placed in the heart of Arda, near but not within, the forest. At first, balance held. Humans and Zeta shared territory, knowledge, and restraint. Then restraint failed. Humans cut more than they needed, hunted beyond replenishment, cleared land not for survival, but for growth. The Zeta sensed the imbalance before it was visible. Warnings were sent, not as threats but as signs. Humans ignored them. The War of Myrmah. When damage became irreversible. Samo, king of the Zeta, chose war. He was not a conqueror. He was a warden of continuation. The conflict was ordered to take place in the forests of Myrmah, where numbers meant nothing, and brute force failed. Humans entered with steel and fire. The Zeta entered with the land. Routes shifted beneath advancing armies. Paths closed behind them. The forest exhausted rather than slaughtered. The Zeta struck briefly and vanished. They broke will, not bodies. And humanity collapsed. Not from weakness, but because Myrmah was never theirs. The black ink boundary. Victory was insufficient. If humans returned, war would repeat. If peace relied on promises, it would be broken. So the final measure was taken. Along the forest's edge, the Zeta inscribed symbols using black living ink. Neither spell nor poison. An autonomous system of natural governance. The symbols answered only to Arda itself. Any human who crossed them was not punished. They were removed, as if nature concluded they no longer belonged within the equation of survival. No hatred, no mercy, only function. The forests of the Zeta were sealed. Separation. The Zeta withdrew into the depths of the forest. They knew humanity would suffer beyond the boundary, but they also knew that allowing further encroachment would doom everything. Sama watched the ink dry upon the earth, aware that this necessary act had fractured the future. Balance, once enforced, leaves scars. And through this scar, all the darkness yet to come would enter Arda. The starvation of humanity and the descent of the Nai. After the forests of Zeta were sealed by the black ink, humanity was not merely cut off from land. It was severed from source. Beyond the forest boundaries, vegetation withered slowly. Trees did not die all at once. They simply stopped giving. The soil no longer carried life, and the seasons failed to answer as they once had. At first, humans believed the change was temporary. Then animals began to die. Then small rivers dried. Then hunger came, not as sudden pain, but as a constant state of absence. They consumed what remained. Then they consumed seed. Then they consumed what was never meant to be eaten. And when nothing was left to take from the earth, they turned their eyes to the sky. They did not pray to Kai. Kai was distant, silent. He was not answered when balance was broken by choice. Instead, they called upon the Nai. In the early nights, the prayers were simple. Pleas for survival. Offerings of words. Hopes whispered into darkness. No answer came. As years passed, the prayers changed. They grew louder, more desperate, shaped by fear rather than faith. And in places of ruin, among collapsed temples, along the sealed edges of the forest, within cities hollowed by starvation, something else began to appear. Omen beings, the Nerder. They did not descend from the sky. They were not summoned by ritual. They formed from energy drained too many times and never returned, from fear repeated until it lost meaning, from supplication emptied of will. They were called the Nerder, 7 in number. They did not move. They did not speak. They did not attack. Skeletal figures draped in long, dark garments, like remnants of rituals that had never been completed. Their eyes were hollow, yet their presence was heavy. They stood at the edges of cities, upon barren hills, before the doors of broken temples. They watched. Some believed them to be gods. Others called them harbingers of death. But the Nerder did nothing. Their existence alone was the message. What comes next cannot be stopped. As starvation deepened, and fear thickened the air, the inevitable occurred. The descent of the Nai. On a night without stars, the air split. The Nai did not arrive in light. They did not descend in radiance. They came with weight, as though the world itself resisted their presence. Their forms held no fixed features. Their eyes were entirely black, closed to both light and darkness. They did not ask for worship. They did not linger in speech. They said only to humanity, "Stop. What you are doing fractures balance. Return to the boundaries." Humanity knelt. They wept. They swore obedience. But their eyes were not honest. They asked the Nai to remain,